The fantasy football playoffs are almost here. One final week of the regular season, so we have to talk about that today. But also, how many of us are in multiple fantasy leagues? Well, what happens when you have conflicting rooting interests? You need one player to score for one of your teams, but then you're going up against that player in another league, so you don't want him to score. It's very confusing. And what about in life? Are we double-minded? Do we have conflicting rooting interests? Let's unpack it. This is the Fantasy Football Fellowship podcast where we unpack fantasy, faith, and life. I'm Bryce Johnson with Trip Smith. He's back in studio. He's a pastor at Hope Community Church. And we are your fantasy coaches here to encourage you and help you win while you play fantasy football with purpose. As we provide fantasy advice, we won't always be right, but we hope we'll be convincing. We're coming to you live from the Unpacking It Ministry studios here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And man, it is an exciting time for fantasy managers if you are getting ready for the playoffs. Now, many of us need one more big win to finish off the season to get in. Others are trying to remain healthy heading into the fantasy playoffs. Some of us will have key lineup decisions this weekend. We're looking at matchups and we're looking at weather. Even here in Charlotte, we got a little snow dusting today, but we saw Sunday night, the Buffalo Bills, they were ready for the snow. The 49ers, not so much. So we've got to factor that in as the playoffs arrive in the fantasy season. So I'm staring at, it looks like four of my 5 teams are going to the playoffs. So feeling confident. I'd say 2 of them have a shot to win it all, probably 2. So I'm excited though. You always want to just be, if I'm in 5 leagues, I got to win one. So we'll see about that. But today on the show, we'll do some week 13 reactions. We'll do fantasy shenanigans. We'll do who is that? Some bandwagon riding, and we'll have some fun today. Encourage everybody to check out fantasyfootballfellowship.com. Make sure you read the weekly breakouts, and we hope that you're finishing the season strong with your fantasy league and your league meetings, and then also preparing for next season as well. So make sure your league's all set for next year. If maybe you started late or, we missed it this season, get involved with Fantasy Football Fellowship next year. And then also, today is Giving Tuesday. So hopefully you're giving, you've got a generous spirit, you're supporting different ministries and nonprofits. And I hope that you will consider Unpacking It Ministries and Fantasy Football Fellowship. We're a part of Unpacking It Ministries. And so we're a nonprofit. We are donor funded and we depend on you. So we hope that you will prayerfully consider supporting us today. Hey, you love fantasy football, you love Jesus, support our ministry. We need you. And so greatly appreciate your support. You can find out more, fantasyfootballfellowship.com/donate, and you can donate there. All right, let's dive in. It was a wild week, week 13, especially last night. I mean, Jameis Winston, that guy, he's a roller coaster ride. That was the response afterward. It's like, this guy is a roller coaster ride. The good, the bad, 497 yards, 1 million interceptions, and pick sixes. Wild night. So let's begin with fantasy shenanigans.
Fantasy shenanigans.
All right, Trip. Man, week 13. How you feeling heading into the final week of the regular season?
Oh man, it's a big week for me, I gotta say. I mean, I think I'm feeling okay. I think I'm feeling confident, but I've never had more teams that are truly on the bubble than I have this season. And producer Aaron and I were just talking about this before we started the episode. I just feel like I don't see many teams in any of the leagues that I'm in that are just dominantly sitting at the top of the rankings. It feels like there's this huge middle portion of every league that's sitting there at 7-6. 8-5, maybe you feel good about 8-5. And I think it's just because we've seen so much inconsistency across the NFL. Unless you have one of those like 4 stud running backs, I don't think we've seen many players, Jamar Chase, deliver week over week. And that's true for every one of my teams. So I am truly on the bubble. I need some wins this weekend. And so I'm hoping this episode can tee me up for a solid performance. Most notably in our Unpacking It League, I'm facing off against one a producer Aaron.
Let's go.
And I think it's kind of a win or die situation for me and probably for him too. So I'm excited about that, man.
I like it.
We'll make him cover his ears for the advice that we give here.
That's right. Don't share too much. So yeah, I went 4-1 this week, but the league I needed to win, I lost. Went into Monday Night Football. All I needed was Njoku to score less than 8 points, which he's done throughout the season. And he absolutely went off. It was actually kind of, I faded out of the game because I lost early. Njoku scored a touchdown early. So I was like, oh, am I going to go to bed and then wake up in the middle of the night to see if I won?
No.
It was taken care of.
Just go to bed
early. It was So
I went into last night needing Jerry Jeudy to score fewer than 30 points. To win in this league that I'm right on the brink of not making the playoffs, and he scored 36 in PPR. And I woke up truly astonished, man. What a game! What a wild game! And I'm thinking they're playing the Broncos. That's a great defense. It's not going to happen. And Winston went off for 500 yards passing, slinging it all over the place. I love that after the game, he said, "I'm praying for the Lord to deliver me from future pick sixes." That was so good. I love Jameis Winston so much, man. I wouldn't want to be depending on him necessarily as my, but he put up some big fantasy numbers for you last night. And that Jameis Winston, Jerry Jeudy stack scored you 70 points on Monday night. So
we always root for the game against your former team. What do you call that?
Yeah.
Revenge. Revenge game. The revenge game. We always think that that's going to happen. It doesn't always, though.
Yeah.
But Jerry Jeudy
said that. He said it mattered to him explicitly. He called that out, that he wanted to perform. He wants to prove Steve Smith wrong, who called him just a guy at the end of the season last year. And he definitely wanted to put up some points on his team. And he, 245 yards receiving. I did not think that was happening. I felt very safe with my lead going into the night last night, and it was brutal to wake up to that. Yeah,
that's a tough one. All right, the other tough thing from the Week 13 situation is the San Francisco 49ers. I went into this season having the sense that things might unravel for the 49ers. I couldn't fully explain why. I just kind of had that sense about them. So I didn't really draft 49ers players this year. Kind of avoided them. But then midway through the year, they started kind of picking up a little bit. But it's officially unraveling time. With CMC out for a while now, IR, I don't think the 49ers will make the playoffs. Jordan Mason goes out. And so for fantasy purposes, how do we feel about the 49ers now? I was listening to some fantasy radio today. It's like, go all in on Isaac Guerendo. It's all about Guerendo. Do you really believe, though, that the 49ers are going to finish the season strong and that their offense is going to be rolling with Guerendo? I don't know. They were horrible against the Bills. It was snowing, but it was concerning. Brock Purdy coming back from injury, but he probably isn't fully healthy. So maybe he shouldn't have come back. And so now what do they do with him? I think there's a lot of concern with the 49ers. Do you agree?
I think I do agree. I mean, I think it all comes down to the health of Brock Purdy's shoulder. They're not eliminated from the playoffs yet. They basically have to, they got to win essentially every game and hope for some other stuff to happen to make the playoffs, but they're not eliminated. So they still have motivation to play, to throw the ball around, to score points. And I think we can't say, based on that snowy, terrible conditions game, what the true state of Brock Purdy's shoulder is. And I was looking at his schedule coming up. I was thinking the same thought this morning. What do we think about the 49ers? What are we going to do? The good news for Guerendo, who we'll talk about later on, is their schedule is pretty favorable. And I think even if they're out of the playoffs, they're going to see what they have in Isaac Guerendo and probably continue to use him. So he's kind of, in some ways, I think he's kind of a situation-proof running back who you could probably start in your flex and expect 10 points or something out of him on a given week. But this week is going to be super telling in terms of how ably Brock Purdy throws the ball around when he's not playing in a terrible snow game against a pretty solid defense. So I think I'm with you. I think I'm pessimistic about the 49ers, but it wouldn't surprise me if they snuck into the playoffs somehow. And McCaffrey, maybe, I don't know if McCaffrey's coming back, but maybe Jordan Mason comes back at the right time. I still think Kyle Shanahan is a great coach. And so if Brock Purdy is healthy, I think there's still fantasy value to be had there. And they could be kind of a surprising team down the stretch, but I wouldn't bet on it.
Yeah, I'm not for sure. But the other shenanigans of this whole situation is, I looked at they had a graphic. The number one consensus fantasy pick over the last handful of years rarely pans out. Right. They end up missing a ton of games. You do not want the number one pick.
You
do not want the consensus number one player.
Yeah.
And so what will that mean for us going into next season? If you have the choice of picking, will you avoid the number one pick? Will you go against consensus? But then will all of consensus start being, kind of go against it too? So it's going to be interesting how that plays out. But CMC, of course, has been a huge letdown for fantasy managers who took him number one. All right, another kind of shenanigans.
Did they just extend McCaffrey too? Right?
Oh, yeah, he makes a lot of money. They're all in on him. A lot of money
for the next 2 or 3 years or something like that. And I mean, how many healthy seasons has he had in his career? Not many.
I mean, he's still probably had 5 unbelievable seasons.
Right. So when he's on the field, he is incredible.
Yeah.
But he's never on the field for a full season. And yeah, when you've got the 101 pick overall, if that pick doesn't hit,
you're done.
You're basically done because you waited 23 picks for your next player. And then, you have to be perfect in your draft after that if that 101 doesn't pan out. And there are plenty of people who picked McCaffrey first overall this season, and they haven't been able to recover from that.
Speaking of top picks, my pick this year was Bijan Robinson. So I went all in on him, and he's been very good the last few weeks. But I watched that game on Sunday, the Chargers and the Falcons. I had some interest in the Falcons with Bijan and Darnell Mooney, with the Chargers, Kamani Vidal, and I want to see what he was going to do with J.K. Dobbins being out. And that game was atrocious. It was painful to watch. And here's my big takeaway. Kirk Cousins, run for the hills. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have him on a roster. I need to drop him. Those 3 interceptions were so bad. I mean, it was like, what are you seeing? What are you thinking? What are you doing? So they're 6-6. Raheem Morris, hey, we're 6-6. We're first in the NFC South. But if you're a fantasy manager, depending on, Cousins and Drake London and Darnell Mooney, I think it's full on panic. And it's like, what is going on? They've lost 3 in a row. But then on the positive, Bijan's been great. But if they're not moving the ball and scoring touchdowns, it's very concerning. So that's another big kind of takeaway from the weekend, because at one point the Falcons were rolling and I was all excited about the Falcons. Now a lot of concern with them. So any other takeaways from the weekend for you or anything else from a shenanigans standpoint?
I mean, the question that you've been asking, I think very sort of with a lot of foresight the last few weeks, is what's going to happen with the Bengals when their playoff hopes are totally dead. And that seems to be the case now. Joe Burrow is having statistically the best season of his career, and they're not going to make the playoffs. And I heard an incredible stat. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's something like teams this season who score more than 30 points in a game are something like 51-14, and the Bengals are 2-5. So, I mean, he has played so well. Their offense has been prolific. They're not making the playoffs at this point. And so him and Jamar Chase don't strike me as the kind of guys that are going to shut it down. Like, I still think they're going to try to win games and play spoiler. I heard they have a 3% chance of making the playoffs or something like that. So maybe that's how you motivate yourself. But certainly like T. Higgins seems like the kind of guy who might just be like, I'm not going to be on this team next season. I'm shutting it down. And so I'm not running from Burrow and the Bengals the way that I feel like I think you're right. I'm running from Cousins and the Falcons. And at this point, what do? You got to rely on those guys. But it's just going to be interesting to see going down the stretch how they perform and how hard they play. If they keep scoring 30+ points a game. Yeah.
Well, and going up against the Steelers, I thought I was a little concerned about Burrow and T. Higgins for that matter. But I benched Burrow. I played Jordan Love over him, and Love was fine. It ended up being a couple point difference. I blew out my guy, so it was good. Yeah. But that was a big win for me.
I would have made the same decision. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
But Joe Burrow now, it means he's defensive proof. Like, there's no defense stopping Joe Burrow in this Bengals offense. If the Steelers aren't stopping him, nobody's stopping him. So from that standpoint, you feel confident. Wow, Burrow's been one of the best guys this year. And so anyway, you're right about the concern though. What are they playing for down the stretch?
Can I ask you a question? And I don't need, you're having a much better fantasy season than me. I don't want to besmirch your good name as a fantasy manager, but why at this juncture of the season, post trade deadline, do you have Joe Burrow and Jordan Love on your team?
It's a keeper league.
Okay.
Yeah.
Say no more. All right.
So it's Yeah, I wouldn't get a lot of value in trading Love.
You're making me question the quality of these leagues that it's like I'm like, how Bryce is winning everywhere. How does he have Joe Burrow and Jordan Love on his team? I would love to be in that situation making that decision.
So it happened because, was it last year Burrow was out for most of the year?
That's right. Okay.
And so I picked up Love, and then I just kept both
and
of
then
them.
it panned. Yeah. Okay.
So that worked out.
Feels good to be able to be making that choice on a week-to-week basis. I'd love to be making that choice. I'm deciding between stinking Trevor Lawrence and that was the other shenanigan. There were 2 moments this week in football where I was just sitting on the couch, absolutely fuming, infuriated. And one of them was when Azeez Al-Shaair, who I saw just got suspended for 3 games. That just kind of came across.
You're great with the names, by the way.
I like that name.
That's honestly, a good one.
It's a cool name. It doesn't seem like a cool dude, but it's a cool name. And when he took out Lawrence, I was screaming at the TV, like, "What are you doing?" In a super flex, I'm starting Lawrence. He scored me 1.3 points. Game over. He's clearly out of the game. The other one where I was sort of screaming and laughing at the same time was the Matt Eberflus, Caleb Williams into the game situation. So there were a couple of moments that had me standing up off the couch shouting at the TV, and it was with Eberflus and Al-Shaair. Fun weekend of football. I was happy that I had Thanksgiving to sort of self-medicate to console me through some difficult losses this week from fantasy. But
well, we'll do accountability and confession in just a little bit, but a little teaser on that. Let's not pump me up too much here. Adonai Mitchell was a starting wide receiver for me this week.
You're not the only one who did
Zeros.
that.
Zeros for Adonai Mitchell. All the hype all week.
Yeah.
He's filling in for Josh Downs. No, forget about it. Hey, and speaking of the Bears and Eberflus, you know what I think is actually disappointing? Thomas Brown taking over as the interim head coach. I think that's a bad thing because he was doing great as the offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Now being responsible, doing both, it's a new role for him. He just stepped into the offensive coordinator. Now he's got to be the head coach.
Your only goal now is to develop Caleb Williams and keep his confidence high. And that wasn't. But that's a decision that's indicative of a dysfunctional franchise, a franchise that doesn't always make the best decisions, shall we say. And so, it doesn't surprise me at all.
You let the special teams coach take over the responsibilities and just let the offense roll. You're not worried about winning games. You're just trying to get the offense going. Come on, Bears. So, if you were counting on Bears, guys, there's some concern there for sure. All right. Well, we will get to some bandwagon riding and accountability and confession in a little bit. But here's what we do here at Fantasy Football Fellowship. We take fantasy concepts, relate them to the Bible, relate them to life. We do a weekly segment called The Breakout, and this week's Breakout has some serious fantasy ramifications or something that I think many of us deal with and wrestle with that we need to talk about from a fantasy standpoint, but also we'll dive into the faith side of it as well. But here's the deal. When we play fantasy football, what we are up against is the real NFL and the teams that we root for, and then the players that are on our roster and those players that we root for. And oftentimes they are in opposition because as a Panthers fan, I've got Bijan Robinson. Well, the Panthers play the Falcons twice a year. Well, I need Bijan to score 20 or more points, even when he's playing against the Panthers. And so there I am sitting watching the games, and I'm rooting both for Bijan and the Falcons to score and for the Panthers to get the stop and win the game. This is very confusing. This is a difficult thing for us to do as fantasy managers, our favorite NFL team and our fantasy team. Then to take it a step further, for those of us in 5 leagues, not everyone's in 5 leagues. Oh, okay. Well, for some of us that are in 5 leagues, we have the same player that we are both rooting for because he's on our roster, and we're going up against him in another league. And so now all of a sudden we have to decide, wait, am I rooting for this guy to score, or I don't want him to score because I really need to win in this league, but I don't need to win in that league. And so what are we doing? We are wavering back and forth. We're all over the place. We're undecided. We don't know, wait, who am I rooting for? What am I doing? And it's a very wild experience for us as fantasy managers, but it is a part of the deal. It's what we sign up for. And for some, they don't want to play fantasy football because of it, because they're so diehard to their favorite team. Now, my brother Colby, he actually has said, I'm done with the Panthers. My favorite team is my fantasy team. So one year for Christmas, I got him a shirt that says my favorite team is my fantasy team. So he's all in on, he just roots for whoever's on his fantasy team. He doesn't care about anything else. So when the Panthers win and we're in our family group chat, we're all excited. Well, we haven't won in a while, but whatever. Or just imagine what that's like. When Panthers win, we're all excited and Colby doesn't care. So anyway, but how have you dealt with the conflicting rooting interests in both regards, your favorite team as well as multiple teams?
Yeah, great question and great topic. I mean, I think this is I've been on a journey here. Let's say when I started playing fantasy football, my first few seasons, I had one team. And then the thought entered my head, if I love this so much, why only have one team? And then I slowly accumulated more teams. And so, like you said, I'm playing in multiple leagues this season. And I think initially what I would do is I'd say, okay, well, across these multiple leagues, let's make sure that I'm getting kind of the same guys that I really believe in and are my favorites. Sometimes that happens, and then I was like, hey, why don't I diversify my rosters such that I can't ever be hurt too badly on any given week? And I would say over the last couple of seasons, that's all gone out the window. In any league, I treat it like it's my only league. I draft as well as I can, right? And then the two rules that I've come up for myself with the past couple of seasons that really just make me feel better are I set my lineups, and when 1 o'clock hits on Sunday, I put the phone down until basically near the end of those early games. I don't look at the scores, right? And then Tuesday morning, I don't pick up my phone and look at fantasy until after like lunchtime. Okay. So, and what that does for me is when it's actually time to watch football, all I'm rooting for is just fun football. I just want to see some fun games. I'd like to see the Panthers win. I have players that I'm rooting for because I know that I like them, but I don't even think anymore about, kind of the conflicting interests until this time of year. When I'm trying to make it into the playoffs, here I am on the bubble. And I always know going into like Sunday night and especially Monday night, like, hey, if Jerry Jeudy has a really great game here, I'm in big trouble. But if who did I need to perform last night? Whatever it is, I just know that I have Kyle Pitts on every one of my fantasy teams, and I really need him to come through for me. A little teaser for later in the episode here, but I've been on a long journey with this conflicting interest sort of situation, and I think that I've reached a healthy place that has to do mostly with just enjoying football, fantasy or real.
I would say that I'm such a fan of the NFL and a fan of fantasy football that actually probably where my rooting interest goes the strongest is just being right. Meaning like whatever.
That's called being a fan of yourself, man.
Yeah, kind of. Well, it's just like I just want to see what I expect to happen to happen.
Yeah.
So
a fan of my own takes. Yeah, well, me too. I'm with you.
Not just takes on the show, but it's just like like Adonai Mitchell. Like, I wanted him for my own team, but it was like, all right. Here's the thought process. The thought process is Josh Downs is out. Adonai Mitchell was a pretty top pick coming out of Texas, great speed. There's all these indications that he's getting better, and Reggie Wayne is his coach. And so I read a little bit about that. So I want that to line up,
right?
Like where my thought process and the information lines up, and it's like, all right, that was a good decision. Like those are the kind of things that I'm rooting for, even beyond the outcomes of some of the fantasy matchups. It's like some of that's just so out of your control. So anyway, that's where my rooting sometimes supersedes. Even like players that aren't even on my rosters, if I just thought like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That guy had a big day today. That lines up. But when the random MVS for the Saints score, like that's the kind of stuff that drives me nuts because it makes no sense. I never saw it coming. You got to be kidding me.
Well, there's been so much of that this season, right? And I think I've just reached a place where I'm always thinking about our fantasy shenanigans segment. And I'm like, I just want to see some shenanigans out here. I want to see Eberflus's face after that terrible coaching decision. I want to see Josh Allen throw and receive a touchdown on the same play,
Crazy.
Shenanigans like that. So I think I've reached a healthy place where I'm having more and more fun just watching football. But man, it's hard for me not. These conflicting interests, it resonates with me. Yeah.
It does. Me too. And ultimately, though, we have to decide, what do we value the most? Do we value our favorite NFL team more than anything? And so if our Panthers are going up against Bijan Robinson, hey, I just want the Panthers to win. If that means I lose in fantasy and Bijan stinks, that's okay because I want the Panthers to win. Is that where we land? Or is it, I don't care about the Panthers. I'm not invested in them. It's all about my fantasy team. That's where all my effort is going into anyway. I've got a little bit more control in some ways. So is that the case? Because otherwise, if we don't get to that point of determining, okay, this league is more important than this league, so I want this, as long as I win this league, I'm good. If that's the case, or if we never do that and we're going back and forth and we're wavering, the term is double-minded. We're double-minded because at the same time, we want the Panthers to win and Bijan Robinson to score. Well, how's that going to work? That doesn't really add up. It's confusing. It's ridiculous. We're all over the place. But that's what we deal with as fantasy managers. And so I looked up the definition of double-minded. According to Merriam-Webster, it means wavering in mind, undecided, marked by hypocrisy, and insincere. All right, so let's talk about this then from a life and faith standpoint. Because are we living a divided life? Where do our interests lie? What are we rooting for? Are we, quote unquote, cheering for God and cheering for the things of God and choosing obedience and living a life of faith in accordance to his ways? Or are we divided where, I like a little bit of the world. I like a little bit of God. I'm going to do my own thing over here. I'm going to pursue selfishness. I'm rooting for me. It's all about me, right? It's all about me in fantasy, but it's all about me in life. Or is it all about God? And are we divided? Are we going back and forth? Are we wavering? Are we double-minded? Are we saying, yeah, I'm all about God. I'm a follower of Jesus. I follow God. Well, what about when we're alone? What about when the temptation happens? What about when we're faced with different opportunities? Which way are we going? Are we in the one foot in the world, one foot in our faith? And how do we deal with the wrestling? And how do we combat some of the wavering? And so before I dive into some scripture, Tripp, what are your initial thoughts on this?
I mean, in some ways, this is the question of the spiritual life, the question of the follower of Jesus. It's do you have a clear idea of the priorities that matter most? So it's possible to have many different desires, many different things that we enjoy and love in this life. But when those things, when we reach a place where there's a decision to be made, where there's something like a crisis moment, do I have a sense of like a hierarchy of the things that I love the most? And I think that that's what the Bible calls wisdom. Wisdom is not being double-minded, not having a disintegrated and fragmented mind, but an integrated and whole and holy way of viewing the world. So yeah, this topic is near the center of the bullseye in terms of importance for what it means to follow Jesus with increasing maturity over the course of a whole lifetime.
That's right. And it is a battle. And we're hopefully we're struggling well and making progress and growing and maturing in our faith. And to your point about this being, a journey. And so are we continuing to become more and more, single-minded in our approach, more aligned with God, where there's not as much, wavering. We're on the straight. Oh, we might slip a little. All right, we're back. And so is that becoming a you think about the waves, I guess, a little bit, but just a tighter path where we're really following Jesus and walking with him day in, day out. And so, all right, how do we combat some of this, where we're insincere or hypocritical or living, these double-minded lives? So a couple of verses to run through. So James 4:7-8 encourages us. So humble yourselves before God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come close to God, and God will come close to you. Wash your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, for your loyalty is divided between God and the world. And so it's considering, it's like, all right, where is my loyalty? Am I truly loyal to God, or am I more concerned with what the world's doing, what the world thinks, what the latest, interest and desire that's being thrown at me? Am I more intrigued by that? Or is my loyalty to God that no matter what, no, that stuff's not important. I don't value that stuff. I value obeying God and placing, him and his word at the forefront of my life. And then going back to the Old Testament, 1 Kings 18:21, it says that then Elijah stood in front of them and said, how much longer will you waver, hobbling between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him. But the people were completely silent. And so to me, if they're silent, they don't know what to do. They're confused. And so that's going back to the fantasy stuff. Sometimes we don't know what to do. And so for us, what are we going to decide? This question is relevant to us too, because Baal was the false god and the idol of that day, where the story takes place in the Old Testament. And so for us, what is the idol in our life? What are we desiring? Are we following that? Or if the Lord is God, are we following him? And is our loyalty fully with him. So any thoughts on those two verses?
Yeah, it is a conversation about idolatry, isn't it? And I think the real challenge here is that this is not just an intellectual pursuit. So we're talking about being double-minded, having sort of a divided mind that runs after many different idols. The way that the Bible uses the word mind is not quite the way that we use the word brain in modern times. And so it's really important to say, I think that I could sit down and with my brain, I could write out sort of the appropriate list of things that I should care about the most in this life.
Mm.
The problem isn't that the problem is not that I don't know. It's that my heart loves and pursues many different things and runs after many different idols. And so the big question, the big challenge is, how do our hearts begin to change in this regard? How do we become single-minded and singular? It's really the word holy in the Bible is really misunderstood, right? We always think of it in terms of holier than thou, or that little old holy church lady that I could never be like, because, but it's like the word holy in the Bible just means whole, integrated, entirely devoted to one thing, consecrated toward one end. And that's work that God has to do in our heart. And really, I think the beginning of it, at least, is to allow God to woo our hearts. There's one of my favorite books that I've ever read. I mean, this is an all-time favorite for me, is a book by a guy named James Smith called You Are What You Love. And the premise of this book is that the things that we love the most, that our heart goes out for the most, are the things that we move towards. What we love determines what we do. And so it seems to me that it's true that the only way to follow Jesus more singularly and with more holiness and integration would be to love him more. And the question is, how does that happen? And in some ways, that's kind of what the story of the whole Bible is. How does that happen? How does Jesus take people who not only were not lovers of him, but were enemies of him, and turn them into his friends and his followers? That's what the gospel is.
Amen. That's really good. And to parallel it back to our rooting interests that are conflicting when it comes to our favorite NFL team or our fantasy team, what do we love more? That's exactly it. What do we love more? Because then our affection and our heart and our rooting and our cheering is for that team. And so for us, do we love God more than anything else?
Yeah.
And do we love him with all we got?
I mean, in some ways, isn't that is the determinative question in some ways of our entire life, is what do you love the most? You're going to pursue and follow the thing that you love the most, the person that you love the most. And the amazing thing about Jesus, and I would argue that he is the only religious figure, and in fact, God is the only being in the universe to whom we can come and say, I don't love you the way that I should. We can confess, I have such a hard time loving you and following you consistently. My mind is so divided. I'm so sort of distracted and idolatrous. And then to hear Jesus say to us, but I still love you, right? I forgive you for that. And I love you unrelentingly, even when your love is weak and wavering. It turns out that vulnerable confession to Jesus and to other people is the very place where transformation begins to happen. Because when we come and tell him the truth, Jesus, I'm so distracted. I'm so double-minded. I'm prone to idolatry. I don't love you the way that I want to love you. And then to hear him say, but I love you so much. And surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. Surely the love of Jesus will run me down. And that's where transformation begins to happen. And slowly over time, I begin to want to follow him more and more singularly. And so to everybody listening out there who's like, I don't know where to start, the very best place to start is to name to Jesus in prayer the things that you love more than him. It seems so counterintuitive, but to say to Jesus, oh, Lord Jesus, I think that I really love money more than I love you, and financial security more than I love you. And then to hear Jesus say to you, I forgive you. There's mercy for that. And I love you even when you fail to love me. That starts to warm and to transform our hearts.
Gosh, it's powerful, man. That's convicting. It's really, really good. And do we love fantasy more? Do we love fantasy more? I'm asking myself that now.
The truth is that I love entertainment. Like I often think that one of my primary areas of sin in my life is something that I've come to think of as entertainment gluttony. Entertainment is good. Fantasy is good. Leisure is a gift from God. But when I glut myself on entertainment and I've got my phone open to my fantasy team in one hand and I'm playing a game on my iPad and I'm watching a movie on Netflix, and it's just like I'm stuffing myself with entertainment, thinking that will make me happy, and it never gives me joy. But Jesus can give me joy.
Amen.
And to confess that entertainment gluttony to him is where I need to start. And then I need to ask him to be more joyous and wonderful than even the good gift of fantasy football, which I love a lot. Yeah.
That's right. And then, the question too is, well, how do we love God more? Well, I think the process of getting to know him more and more. The more we know God, the more we love God. And then other things you start to realize, yeah, they're not as great. They're not as great. But when we have maybe a false sense of who God is, or we don't know his true character, and we're not enjoying him for the fullness of who he is and what he offers us to himself, and the joy that is found in him, well, yeah, then we start searching for other things, and it's easy to get distracted and double-minded. But the more we know him, the more we love him, and the more our thoughts and our awe is toward him. It's like, man, yeah, I love him more than all this other stuff. And so then it was when you love him, then you want to obey him, and then you want to follow him, and you want to tell others about him, and it's just this process of a journey with him. So that's what we're all in process, and it's a daily battle. And so that's why we've got to continue to get into God's word and continue to saturate ourselves with him and the things of God. And so I hope that this podcast can supplement that as well, and encourage you. And so that's our heart. It's encouraging to us because we're in this journey with you. We love fantasy football, but man, we got to keep going back. I don't love it more than God. I can't love it more than God. Because it fails. I put Adonai Mitchell. He gave me 0 points. I can't put my hope in fantasy football. Are you kidding me? God's promise. He delivers, man. He delivers. He's the deliverer. That word keeps popping up. Deliver. He keeps delivering. You talked about earlier, Jameis Winston asking God to deliver him from his pick six. God is the deliverer. He truly is. Now, when it comes to pick sixes for Jameis Winston, that might be that's
God can do all things. Nothing is impossible.
That's right. We got to trust him in that. We got to trust him in that. All right. The last thing we'll share, and you mentioned this earlier too. When it comes to wisdom, we want to live a wise life. And so, how do we gain wisdom? Well, we ask God for it. But there's a key element to this, and so it's found in James 1:6-8. This is the Amplified translation. It says, "But he must ask for wisdom in faith, without doubting God's willingness to help. For the one who doubts is like a billowing surge of the sea that is blown about and tossed by the wind. For such a person ought not to think or expect that he will receive anything at all from the Lord, being a double-minded man, unstable and restless in all his ways, in everything he thinks, feels, or decides." And so as we approach God and ask him for wisdom and help me live, a life that honors you, and it's wise, and it's filled with, the right choices. Well, we have to go to him believing that his wisdom is true, that it's right. And we trust him that he will give us the wisdom that we need. And so as we approach him in confidence and in faith and in trust, he will deliver. He will give us the wisdom that we need. We can't be this double-minded where it's like, well, I don't know, and all this stuff. Now, listen, we're going to wrestle with doubt, and there's a part of this, and again, the journey that we're all on, and we're trying to struggle well. But as we approach him genuinely with a heart that's for him and open to him and to receive and go, God, I can't find wisdom anywhere else. All these other false gods and idols, I know they're not going to give me and deliver what I'm looking for. They're not going to give me the wisdom that I need to make the right choices in this life. You are. So I'm coming to you and help me with my double-mindedness and my doubt and my disbelief. Help me with that and give me the wisdom that I need to understand your word and to know you for who you really are, and give me a passion to love you fully. So we'll end with that verse and any other thoughts from you, Trip.
No, that's such a great place to end, right? To really believe in God doesn't mean that we don't struggle. Doesn't mean that the process isn't slow, but it does mean we keep coming back to him saying, Lord, if you don't do this in me, if you don't help me, I'm hopeless, but I'm believing that you're going to help me. So give me wisdom, give me grace, and slowly but surely change me. And he really will do that.
Amen. Absolutely. All right, there you go. That's this week's Breakout, conflicting rooting interests. Heading into the final week of the fantasy playoffs, we've got some conflicting rooting interests as well. One league, it's like, all right, if you're secure in the playoffs, all right, I can lose that one, but man, I need to win over here. But that's part of the deal. All right, so let's we still got to do some bandwagon riding, but let's begin with some accountability and confession. We got to get it off our chest. Where did we go wrong in week 13? Here we go.
I guess I forgot that you never ever make a mistake.
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber, you go and do something like this and totally redeem yourself.
I am the smartest man alive.
All right, so I will start. I am in a 14-team league, and the waiver wire is atrocious. I mean, there's nobody available. But what I do is after games are over, you can still drop players and go pick up a player that has yet to play. So on Yahoo, you're allowed to do that. ESPN, you can't do it. Fantrax, you can't do it. But on Yahoo, you can do that. And so Sunday night, I forget who I dropped. I dropped somebody that didn't have a good game. And I go, all right, let me go grab somebody from San Francisco. And so I decided to pick up Ricky Pearsall instead of Isaac Guerrero. And so, listen, I'm not like, I don't think Guerrero is going to be this unbelievable guy that some people do, that he's going to be a fantasy champion winner. I just think I'm doubting the 49ers in that regard. But man, I blew it. I could have had Guerrero. I would have rather had Guerrero than Ricky Pearsall. That's for sure. So those are the moments though in the fantasy season that you could have gotten this guy. Oh, I should have gotten that guy. And sometimes there's just luck. There's no rhyme or reason. Little did I know that both running backs ahead of him would go down. But nonetheless, I made the wrong choice there. And as you know, all of you loyal listeners, Bryce is the Kamani Vidal guy. All right. I've taken that on. And let's face it, 4 carries for 20 yards, 5 yards a carry. Feed the man. I mean, I don't understand what the Chargers are doing. The offense is so frustrating. They barely win against the Falcons. It was an ugly game all around. So I'll confess, I started Vidal as a flex option. A little desperate in that league, but he did not deliver. So that was disappointing. And I'm so stubborn though. I'm still thinking he's going to get his moment. Because not like, I mean, Gus was okay too, but neither one of them really carried the load. So there's still an opportunity with LA. And now with their stud wide receiver, the one that I decided not to trade for. I've already forgotten his name.
McConkey?
Yeah, Lad McConkey. Early in the season, I decided not to trade for him, so I've forgotten his name. But he's now banged up. So if they can't depend on him, they got to run the ball even more. Now that opens up the door. But nonetheless, I will confess, yet again, I'm wrong on Vidal. All right, there you go. So what about for you? What do you need to confess this week?
This is hard for me. There are 2 guys that I need to talk about. Okay. One of them is Garrett Wilson. And I think when we had our episode before the beginning of the season where we each chose a player at each position who was like our guy, like our fantasy MVPs, I think both of these guys were on my list. Garrett Wilson is someone that I believed in so much coming into this season. And I think that I thought Rodgers was going to be serviceable. And I was very, very worried when they traded for Devontae Adams because I thought that this is going to be Rodgers' security blanket. Garrett Wilson is going to be the second option now. And then I think it was either the next game or the second game that Adams was on the team when Garrett Wilson had that incredible one-handed catch in the back of the end zone. I can't remember who they were playing. I think it was on a Thursday night. He scored 2 touchdowns in that game. He had close to 100 yards. And I said, Garrett Wilson is the dude, and he is going to be the guy. Well, this week, Rodgers was just like, his back is against the wall, and he was just looking to Devontae Adams every single time that he had to pass the ball. Garrett Wilson was an afterthought, and Garrett Wilson will continue to be an afterthought. I kind of think that Tyrod Taylor is going to be starting sooner than later for the Jets, but I don't know if they can make that move as long as Rodgers is healthy. And Garrett Wilson, that hurts me so much. The one that hurts me even more is Kyle Pitts. What has happened to Kyle Pitts in the second half of this season has been absolutely brutal. And I was a huge Kyle Pitts believer coming into the season. He is the guy that across my teams I have on the most rosters. I was just full-throated in support of him. And I thought coming out of the bye, they're going to feature Kyle Pitts. Now, you rightly, Kirk Cousins looks bad, right? But Drake London still managed to have a decent game. And Ray McLeod had a good game. So the thing that I did not foresee and would have never guessed is that Ray McCloud is the third receiver on that team, not Kyle Pitts. You could have, okay, Drake London, best receiver on the team, best pass catcher on the team, whatever. Darnell Mooney, I would have argued it's between Kyle Pitts and Darnell Mooney on a game-to-game basis who's going to be the second guy. Never thought Ray McCloud would be an issue. And I think the problem is that when you see these elite athletic tight ends who you're like, this guy's going to break the game, he's going to be the kind of guy that you want to put in your tight end slot and rely on. The assumption is that they're going to be lining up in the tight end position, but Kyle Pitts lines up as a wide receiver on 90% of the plays that he's on the field. And Kirk Cousins is just looking to Drake London and Darnell Mooney and Ray McCloud more than he looks to Kyle Pitts. That one is absolutely killing me. And I just want to say right here, I traded Jaden Daniels and Jonnu Smith to producer Aaron for Kyler Murray and Kyle Pitts. And through one game, it looks really bad. And what I've decided is I'm just going to go down with this ship. I have to win this week to make it into the playoffs. I would have won if I'd had Jaden Daniels and Jonnu. Most of it was just Jaden is on bye this week, and Jonnu, I'm not a believer in spite of the 2 great games that he's had, but now he's had 3 amazing games in a row.
Jonnu, I'm a believer.
And you got to say right now that he's way higher than Pitts in terms of guys that you would like to start at tight end. And so this week is just like, Kyler's playing quarterback for me. I'm keeping Kyle Pitts in at tight end, and I'm going to go down with this ship. And so please, Kyle Pitts, score 30 points for me this week.
Oh, you're dreaming. You are dreaming, my friend.
I think I am. But I planted my flag so hard on the Kyle Pitts. Like, this is a hill that I am going to die on. I'm going to die on this hill.
Ohio State coming after you, trying to take your flag. Take that flag down. Take it out of here.
We'll have a little fight after the podcast here. But
throwing that flag for you. You better hope that Michael Penix Jr. gets put in there. And maybe that'll spark this offense.
Maybe.
Because I like Kirk Cousins.
He doesn't look healthy.
It's not good. I mean,
the interception he had on the far, the decision making is not good, but the interception that he had on the far sideline, if you watch the replay, he doesn't put any weight on his back foot, and he just kind of, it's all arm trying to get it out there, and that's why it gets picked off. I think there's something wrong with Kirk Cousins. I don't know how they don't give him one more game. And I need Kyle Pitts to have a big game this week. So I'm going to die on this hill. Let's check back in next week. Kyle Pitts, here it comes, 30-pointer. This is the week when he's going to do it for me, man. And I'm going to beat Aaron in the final game of the regular season and sneak into the playoffs here. This is a hill that I'm ready to die on, and I may very well die.
Yeah, you might. You might. I'm counting on it. Nah. All right. Well, cool. There you go. There's a little confession. You can leave your comments. What do you need to confess? Where did you miss in week 13 or so far this season? All right. I want to do kind of a unique segment this week. We'll run quickly through it, but you can leave your comments as well on this one. But really the question is, who do you trust? Who are you benching? I mean, these are the key, moments of the season as we're positioning ourselves for the playoffs, where we're going to have to make some of these choices. And so let me run through a few names. Do you trust them? Are you benching them? Kenneth Walker, CJ Stroud, DK Metcalf, Jaden Reed, Zay Flowers, Brock Purdy. These are guys that, lately they've let you down. Now, Jaden Reed had a good week this week. Many people probably had him on their bench this week, but do you trust any Packers players? For me, I'm all in on Kenneth Walker this season, but I mean, are you kidding me? 7.6 points this week. He scored at least 17 points in each of his first 5 games of this year and has scored less than 16 in each of his past 5. So this has been now a losing streak as far as point production for Kenneth Walker, even though Seattle won over the weekend. Charbonnet vultured the touchdown. So do you trust him? For me, I can't bench him. So do I trust him? No, but I can't bench him. So those are conflicting thoughts, but that's where I come out on that. So any of those players that you want to jump in on, Trip?
I definitely trust Kenneth Walker. I'm a little more worried about DK Metcalf because, like I said last week, I think that JSN has sort of ascended where they're kind of the 1A and 1B now. Like, so Metcalf is a guy that I don't know that we can expect him to be sort of this alpha wide receiver 1 in fantasy with Jackson Smith-Njigba getting as much volume as he's getting. You asked about Zay Flowers on here. I continue to believe that I will not trust any Ravens pass catcher.
Agreed.
Now, you may be in a position where you've got to start one of these guys, But I think that the Ravens, they're having a little bit of a midseason kind of identity crisis here that is embodied by what has happened to Deontay Johnson, where they basically said, we don't even know how we're going to get this guy in the lineup. And he didn't have a single offensive snap this week. So he's dead and gone. We put him away many weeks ago. But what that indicates to me is that they don't quite know what their offense is outside of Derrick Henry running for 100+ yards, So Zay Flowers will have a few more blow up weeks, and maybe you throw him in there and say, this is the kind of guy who could win me a week. But also, I don't think you can have any confidence that he's going to score you double-digit points on any given week. And I think that's true of every pass catcher on the Ravens offense, So you feel good if you've got Lamar. He continues to look great. Derrick Henry's had a little bit of a down couple of weeks, but he's going to be fine. But yeah, I have no confidence in Zay Flowers.
But it's fair to wonder, will Henry wind down the regular season? And maybe they even pull back a little bit with him to then ramp him up for the playoffs, because they really got him for the playoffs, because the Ravens are a good regular season team. So there's a little bit of concern there, I think for Henry, because Henry has carried many fantasy teams. I'm not sure he'll carry you to a fantasy championship. I think it's fair to question. Now, obviously, you're not going to bench him, but as far as trust goes, yeah, there's something to be said about that. And then, as far as CJ Stroud goes, the downside is you've been waiting for him to really get that big game, that big performance, and it just hasn't happened. And so now they're on a bye this week. So that means you're going into the playoffs. If you did make the playoffs with CJ Stroud, you can't trust him. I don't think you could start him. So whoever you're playing either regularly or this week with CJ Stroud on the bye, that's probably the guy you got to roll with, which is crazy to think. But Houston, their offense, as good as Joe Mixon has been, and Nico Collins has been great, but Stroud not lighting it up. It's very interesting. It's a weird season for him. And you had to take it. You had to draft him pretty high.
Right. Yeah. Rest of the season, would you rather have Drake May or CJ Stroud? May's running a lot.
Yeah. Gosh.
Caleb Williams or CJ Stroud?
Man, yeah.
It's hard.
I don't think you're winning with any of those guys, but yeah, I mean,
Will Levis or CJ Stroud? Just kidding.
Bo Nix.
But Bo Nix at this point is a certified quarterback one in fantasy football. Yeah, you're starting him until further notice. I think you're probably starting Jameis Winston over CJ Stroud at this point. He's just
crazy.
The Texans are probably going to they're going to win games. They're probably going to, get into the playoffs, but Stroud looks like he's taken a step back, or probably what has actually happened is that the rest of the league has film on him now, has adjusted to him. The season hasn't gone perfectly according to plan. Kind of everything broke right for him last year, and that's not happening this year. So I still think he's a good quarterback. He's going to have a long and successful career in the NFL, but you can't feel good about starting him going into the playoffs.
No, it's crazy. Yeah. Last year he was carrying teams. All right, let's jump to a quick segment of bandwagon riding, and then we'll let you know if we're hopping on or off.
Get off the bandwagon.
It's time for bandwagon riding. Getting on, getting off. Make up your mind, all right?
All right, I'm going to throw out all the names. Are we hopping on or choosing not to jump on, or some of these guys are we jumping off? Russell Wilson, Isaiah Pacheco, Rico Dowdle, MVS, Adam Thielen. Who you jumping on? Who you jumping off?
Russell Wilson had a huge game this week, and everyone needs to be very concerned if you're counting on him in fantasy, primarily because he plays the Eagles in the first week of the playoffs at Philly. So there's a chance for a cold, kind of bad weather game against what is starting to look like one of the best defenses, if not the best defense in the NFL. So you just got to be aware that that's coming for Russell Wilson. He plays Cleveland this week, and I think you can probably start him against the Browns if you need to, but I would feel so scared starting Russell Wilson against Philadelphia in the first week of the playoffs. So I think I'm off that bandwagon. Definitely I'm off the Isaiah Pacheco bandwagon. They just don't need him until the playoffs. So they're going to continue to ease him in. It's going to be a 50-50 split, I think, with Kareem Hunt. So Rico Dowdle, I'm all in. I've been a believer in Rico Dowdle from the beginning of the season. I think that he's just going to continue to be the workhorse, and the Cowboys have a pretty easy schedule going forward, and you're not going to throw it around with Cooper Rush is the way that you would have with Dak Prescott. So I think Rico is the kind of guy who, with some qualification, with some caution, Rico Dowdle could be one of those like sneaky RBs that won me my fantasy championship. Okay. He has such an easy schedule. No, I see your face. No one has ever been excited about Rico Dowdle, but the last few weeks he's been an RB1 and he passes the eye test for me, and they have a really favorable schedule coming up. So I wouldn't want to be relying on him as like my stud sort of alpha running back, but I kind of think Rico Dowdle is going to continue to be a thing all the way through the fantasy playoffs this year.
He's kind of one of those guys that injuries find him.
That's true.
So you do have to be cautious in that regard. But no, he was great. He was playing against the Giants, but to your point, you get some other nice matchups, and he could be all right. I'm actually jumping on the Isaiah Pacheco bandwagon because I think Kareem Hunt, it was cute, but he's done. He's run out of gas. He gave all he had, and that's it. Now it's Pacheco time.
Yeah,
it'll be a little bit better this week, and then that first round of the playoffs, you've been waiting on Pacheco all year long. He'll finally hit for you. So I think,
yeah, okay. I think you can convince me on that. And the reason being that the Chiefs have sort of stagnated a little bit these last few weeks. They haven't looked good, and they got to figure out their offense. The offensive line is in rough shape, and I think the way that you account for that when you have a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes is you try to run the ball a little bit more. And so, yeah, okay, I think you convinced me there that I'm going to be cautiously optimistic about Rico Dowdle. Chargers this week is a tough matchup. And then he plays Pittsburgh in week 17, but in between here and there, yeah, pretty good schedule for the playoffs.
For Pacheco or Dowdle?
Pacheco.
Plays,
yeah.
Yep.
Did I say Dowdle? Yeah, Pacheco has got a decent playoff schedule.
Nice. All right. And then you got to jump on the Adam Thielen bandwagon. Let's go. I mean, that catch he had was unbelievable. That was one of the catches of the year.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
He still got it.
Thielen, man, when he's out there and healthy, all he does is catch passes and catch touchdowns. That's what he does. So, there you go. You can feel confident in Thielen. I don't have him on any of my teams.
He's Bryce Young's. I think he's Bryce Young's best friend right now.
Yes.
And Bryce, something's going on there. Don't know what to believe about him, but until further notice, you can put Thielen in your flex and be pretty optimistic about that. I think
something's going on with Aaron over here. Sneezes,
man.
Sneezing
he's allergic to Adam Thielen. He's allergic to the Panthers. I think I might be too.
Well, it's also so hot in our studio, so it's remarkable with the office that we're in. When it's cold outside, so today was a snowy day, it's unbelievably hot in here. And then in the summer, it's freezing in here. So I have to bundle up in the middle of the summer. It's 100 degrees outside, and in here we're frigid. So that's how it works here. All right, last segment. We do it every week. Players that score out of the blue. We don't know who they are. What are they doing getting into the end zone? And we ask the question, who is that?
Who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
AJ Barner.
Seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
I think he had 2 catches and then he scored a touchdown. So AJ Barner, your boy from the Seahawks. Do you know who that is, Aaron? Oh, you know who it is. All right, we don't know who it is. All right, and then how about Isaiah Davis for the Jets?
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
He caught a touchdown. He's a running back who caught a touchdown.
Well, he scored more points than Breece Hall and Braylon Allen this week, and I had never heard his name before. And I'm like, what is going on here?
Isaiah Davis, how about that? And then this one was fun. So the Raiders, I mean, if the running back roulette in with Las Vegas has been absolutely crazy. But how about Sincere McCormick?
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
He led the Raiders with 64 yards rushing.
Can I say he might be the running back one in Las Vegas for the rest of the year? Now, how much value that has is certainly up for debate, but the last 2 weeks, he has been the favored guy, and he's my favorite name to appear in this segment all season long. I love the name Sincere McCormick. So I may go pick him up and just start him on principle because I like this name so much.
All right. How about Michael Burton?
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
I am a Michael Burton fan. 1 rushing yard, one touchdown, 1 carry, 1 rushing yard, 1 touchdown. Fullback for Denver last night got into the end zone.
And does Michael Burton have more points than Jermaine Burton this season?
He might.
At this point, he's the better Burton.
I don't know why he doesn't go by Mike, but Michael Burton. There you go. So little reference. Hopefully some might get that one. But all right, there you go. There's our segment.
Sincere
Who is
McCormick is back on the practice squad, by the way. So
it's like
so
Jeremy
take away
McNichols with
everything that
Washington.
yeah, right.
It's like wait, the guy does pretty well. And
Forget everything I
him,
just said about Sincere McCormick. He's on the practice squad again. So
you throw him back on the bench. And all right, as far as waiver wire goes, it's going to be totally dependent on your league. I don't even know who to recommend at this point. It seems like Isaac Guerendo's everybody's favorite this week. You want to get back up running backs. I always say that. This time of year, those are the guys you're trying to snag on the waiver wire, and then you're trying to prepare for the playoffs. If you're already locked in, don't worry about this week. You're looking 2 weeks ahead, obviously. So that's the key there.
Check and see if anybody like frustration dropped Keon Coleman. You know, again, not the kind of guy that I want to be relying on going into the playoffs, but something crazy happens and you got to throw sort of a dart. Just maybe somebody's going to catch a long touchdown pass. Keon Coleman's been out with that wrist injury. He almost played this week, and then last minute they declared him out again. You know, so somebody might have frustration dropped him in your league, and he's the kind of guy that I'd be okay having on my bench just in case of emergency. Pull this shoot, you know, like he could be the kind of guy that gets you a random 11 points in the playoffs in a flex spot.
With the buys this week, you're desperate. Sterling Shepard gives you 8 to 12 points.
Yeah.
So if you just want 8 to 12 points, now if you're expecting more than that, forget about it. But he probably isn't going to give you less than 8.
Yeah,
so
he's the wide receiver too in
4
Tampa
catches,
Bay,
40 yards is what it gets you 8 points. So now, it just depends on your situation. So there's a name to consider. Should have played him instead of Adonai Mitchell with a big 0. Come on, Adonai. Let's get it together. All right. Well, hey, this was a fun show today. Thanks to everybody listening. Looks like we have some new viewers today. So glad to have you a part of the show today. For Aaron, our producer, hopefully we'll help him with his sneezing. For Trip, you and Kyle Pitts have a wonderful time together.
Come on,
as
Kyle.
you plant your flag. So good luck with that. I'm Bryce, and I'm a fantasy manager who follows Jesus. I believe in the good news that he died on the cross for my sin. He was resurrected, and through faith, I've been saved by his grace. I hope that is true for you as well, and I hope you'll join me as we live life as sports fans who follow Jesus together. Let's not be double-minded. Let's love Jesus with all we got, and let's do this life together and encourage one another. So have a great week. Final week of the fantasy regular season. Hopefully you get into the playoffs. Enjoy, and we'll talk to you next time right here on the Fantasy Football Fellowship Podcast.